Michelangelo the Mussel saves his community. This is a story about Michelangelo the Mussel and his trip down the Mississippi River to get to the Gulf of Mexico and save all the marine and wildlife. Michelangelo comes from a family of mussels that have been created to purify the water and be a part of the family, which is an integral food source for other wildlife and animals. Michelangelo heard that his family's homes are being destroyed along the banks of the Mississippi River in the Gulf of Mexico because pollution from the industrial complex, and he wanted to save his family. Michelangelo the Mussel decided it was time to travel down south to save his family. He had to find out where his family lived before he left on his trip. And he knew the perfect person to ask, Mrs. Henrietta the Heron, who lived in the nest on the big log at the riverbank. Michelangelo visited Mrs. Henrietta and found out that he had family down south in the Mississippi River Delta in Louisiana, which opened out into the Gulf of Mexico. In order for Michelangelo to find his family of mussels, he had to follow the water current of the Mississippi River for 4 days. Michelangelo got packed up and was off on his trip. The first day of his trip, Michelangelo was supposed to deliver a message to Mrs. Henrietta's cousin, Hunter the Heron. Michelangelo was to find Hunter in Lake Pepin near Keokuk, Iowa. Hunter was nowhere to be found because of the man-made dam that disrupted all wildlife in the area, included Hunter the Heron's home. Michelangelo was very worried that he couldn't deliver Mrs. Henrietta's message to Hunter, but he decided that he couldn't spend any more time looking for him, and he continued on his journey down the river. On the second day of Michelangelo, as he traveled down the Mississippi River, he noticed that some of the catfish were passing looked very ill. He didn't want to stop, but Michelangelo wanted to try to see why the catfish in the area were so sick. So he couldn't help himself, and he stopped to talk to Kitty the catfish. He asked her why everyone was so sick and looked so sad. Kitty the catfish told Michelangelo about how chemicals from farms by the river were polluting their homes. The rains in the area were eroding the topsoil on the farms, and the petroleum-based fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides were being carried into the river. Kitty told Michelangelo that all the chemicals were making all her friends and family very, very sick. Michelangelo asked how he could help, and Kitty told him to tell the farmers to change their farming practices to natural farming practices in order to provide a regenerative ecosystem for all wildlife in and around the river. Even though Michelangelo didn't know any farmers by the river, he told Kitty that he would pass along the message and help any way he could. He thought when he reached his family that they would have the solutions to his problem, and he continued on his trip. On the third day of his trip, he ended up in Arkansas, and he ran into some weird colored waters in the river, and he couldn't find anybody to help him find some food. Michelangelo the Mussel thought to himself that this place was a happening place according to Mrs. Henrietta the Heron. Arkansas was supposed to be an underwater oasis loaded with wildlife and marine life, but it was desolate and dark. As Michelangelo made it to the riverbank to find some help and direction to the local restaurant, he came across Krusty, the scared little crab. Krusty told Michelangelo that the local plastic factory and paper mills were dumping their solvents and polluted waste into the river, and it was turning all the water dark brown. The pollution was causing everyone in the area to relocate and find new homes to raise their families. The factories in the area were destroying homes and breaking up family bonds with all the animals in the river's ecosystem. Michelangelo was determined to get to his destination in Louisiana to find his family, and he decided not to let all the bad news hinder his travels. Instead, Michelangelo the Mussel wanted to be sure to find help from the right people when he got to his family. On the last day of Michelangelo's trip, he traveled to his final destination at the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico in the Mississippi River Delta in Louisiana to meet his family. When he arrived to the right place, he realized he couldn't find anyone around. He thought he was lost, and he was eager to find some help to see if he was in the right spot. After a couple hours of traveling to the coast, he came across the NOAA station. The NOAA station is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Michelangelo remembered that Mrs. Henrietta the Heron said he could visit a Noah station if he ever needed help along his journey. So Michelangelo met Captain Sellout, who was in charge of the Noah station. Michelangelo started to tell Captain Sellout about his journey down the Mississippi River and all his problems that he noticed along the trip and how he thought he could help fix the problems. He told Captain Sellout about how man-made dams were destroying habitats for marine and wildlife up and down the river. Michelangelo told him that the farmers along the riverbanks needed to change their farming practices to natural practices that help rejuvenate wildlife habitat along the river and help retain the topsoil of farmlands and put programs in place to prevent erosion. He also told Captain Sellout about the corporate complex factories that were polluting the rivers and destroying the Mississippi River's wildlife ecosystems that supports the way nature works together. After Michelangelo the Mussel told Captain Sellout how to fix all the problems he encountered, Captain Sellout told Michelangelo that there was nothing he could do because all his bosses and organizations that controlled Noah supported all the things that were destroying the marine and wildlife habitats along the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico. He also told Michelangelo that all of his family had relocated to the coast of Florida because the pollution got so bad in the Gulf of Mexico and Louisiana that conditions are unsuitable for most marine and wildlife. Captain Sellout said that the area is called the hypoxic dead zone. Michelangelo decided that he would not accept Captain Sellout's comment about not being able to fix the problems. Michelangelo decided that he wasn't meant to meet his family, and instead he created to help fix all the problems that he encountered along his journey to the Gulf of Mexico. Michelangelo the Mussel rallied all the marine and wildlife together from 200 kilometers to change things and help his friends and family. He was able to build a new mussel community to start purifying the water and eliminate toxins that needed to be cleaned out of the water. The communities all along the riverbanks decided to follow Michelangelo's initiatives to clean up the man-made disasters that were destroying the ecosystems. The animals along the riverbanks made farmers change to natural farming practices, and all factories were eliminated from the river altogether. As all this happened, marine and wildlife habitats were reestablished, and Michelangelo helped save the Mississippi watershed into the Gulf of Mexico, and life as they knew it prior to the Industrial Revolution was restored. Michelangelo the Mussel saved his community. The end.
You wrote that? Yay!